Hi, my name's Gary Marco, and this is
Jason Mahr.
and we're with myfreedomjourney.com. We're an organization that we're out there trying to get information to people to try to help them find freedom, to learn how to navigate their lives a little better. We both have experience in coaching people doing that, and this is our first podcast. And since it's our first one, I thought it would be appropriate for us to talk about Jason's freedom journey.
Yeah.
That's how we met. So, Jason.
Yeah, Gary
tell
and
us
I
your
met
story.
when I was working for a church. If you know anything about my background, if you Googled me or whatever, you know that I've worked for several churches, several different organizations. So I do have a ministry background. And the church that I was working for was a different one than I'd ever worked for before. So they were very specific on the target that they were wanting to reach. And of course, in the church world, people would say, if you're trying to reach, who's your target? Who you're trying to reach? People would say, everybody. Everybody is the target. However, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. So this church was a little different in that they had a specific target they were trying to reach in their neighborhood, and I respected that.
Right.
However, if you know anything about my story, if you've gone to our website and you've seen my why story, why I do what I do, going and working at this church was similar to like being at home when I was growing up. It was a very kind of controlling environment. I learned a lot about how to reach a certain target, but for me personally, because I had some brokenness inside of me, and we're obviously not going to discuss that yet, but the environment that I had to learn in and work in was really pressing against that brokenness,
Right.
and driving me to a depressive state. And I didn't know that. So really was kind of on the verge of losing my job.
Sure.
Because I was ineffective in that place, because everything I would pitch to them, everything that I would promote to them, they would say, nice try.
Yeah.
But that's not
It's not going to work because our target market's different.
Yes.
And what was interesting is that at some point or another, this organization brought in a group to do some leadership training, and I was associated with that group, though I wasn't in the training. I was off doing something else that day. I don't remember. After the training, I got a call from one of the leaders of the organization and said, hey, look, the training was great. We would like you to coach one of our people in our organization. And he really didn't give me much information on it. It was just, hey, we want you to coach this guy. Why don't you get a hold of him and we'll go from there. So I gave Jason a call and
we got together. And again, even before that, the leader of the organization sat me down and said, I see that there's something broken inside of you. And this was even before we did the training with that group.
Yeah, that's true.
And he said, but instead of, letting you go, we're going to give you the tools that it takes to find out what's going on inside, where you're broken, with a bit of a caveat, which was if you don't use the tools, we'll have to talk about your employment.
Yeah.
So it was, I wouldn't call it an ultimatum, but that's kind of exactly what it was.
Pretty close.
It was a good ultimatum, positive one. So we did the leadership training, and the whole time I probably paid better attention than anybody in the room, because I knew I needed to soak in these tools and I needed to apply them. And I totally agreed with the assessment, because I remember when he told me that there's something broken inside of you, I just wept.
Right.
Because it hit a chord inside of me. And so we went through the training, and I paid close attention, and it spoke my language. I love leadership stuff. I'm very passionate about coaching people. And so I instantly thought, man, I could probably do this someday. But first was, dealing with myself.
Yeah, for sure. So anyways, I get this call from the leader of the organization. We set up a meeting. And quite frankly, I don't remember much about our first meeting, other than what I do in my coaching is I really try my best to establish trust. Because if you go in and just start, punching the guy in the nose about what he's struggling with, it normally doesn't work too well. So I really went in there and had a conversation with him, and one of the keys to trust is being transparent yourself. I see it all the time. Even if we're not pushing church or anything like this, but you even see it in churches where a pastor will stand up and they'll tell you, well, you need to do this, that, and the other thing, but they're not being transparent that they probably struggle with the same stuff that they're telling the congregation to work with. So I knew it was important for me to share some of the struggles that I've had in my lifetime with Jason, so he knew that I really wasn't better than him. I just had a little bit more experience maybe in some of the areas that he was struggling with, or some of the things he was struggling with. And that I'm human too, and I've gone through some difficult times myself.
Yeah.
The first real hallmark meeting that I remember having is that one in the that conference room with the whiteboard.
Yeah.
So why don't we go into that?
Yeah, we had, and of course, when we started meeting, it was kind of both like, what the heck are we doing here?
Yeah.
But Gary didn't know what he was getting into. I kind of knew what I was getting into because I'd already been through this training.
Right.
So some of the tools were already on the table. I knew some of the language, and I think it kind of gave us a jump start in our relationship and the pathway that we needed to take.
Right.
Because I was fully aware of that. For some people, it takes longer, to get to the aha moment. But yeah, we got together and we took the whiteboard out. I think there was a big sheet of paper there and stuff. We were writing stuff on. I had these huge, massive pieces of paper that we were writing out all of my issues on, and I had to fold them up and take them. I still have them at my house.
As a reminder, huh?
Yeah. So I don't have enough wall space to hang them in my house, but there was a lot of aha moments in the whole process. But what was most significant to me was obviously Gary's vulnerability, his ability to share, like, hey, he didn't come in like, I own this place, or I'm better than you, so you must follow me, or anything like that. It was just basically just like we're sitting down right now, having a conversation and getting to know each other. And then Gary started writing stuff up on the board, and that's when it got crazy.
Doing.
Yeah.
Was that when that was after we did the 360, right? The first one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I had Jason do kind of, I won't call it an unusual 360, but an informal 360. And I gave him a piece of paper, and we had a circle on the piece of paper with some lines on it. And I said, go to people that know you well, that you're in good relationships with, and I want you to ask them three things you struggle with. And tell them before they answer that you're going to give them no kickback and you're going to have no reaction, because this is to help you out. Because most people, if they're in a relationship with someone, will know how they're going to react, and they may sugarcoat the process. And you wanted the junk. Mm-hmm. So here, give me the junk that I struggle with.
I didn't want the junk. The junk was headed my way.
Yeah, the junk was headed your way. And I also wanted Jason to write down the stuff that he felt he struggled with. And he brought that in, and that's what we first started putting on that whiteboard. Mm-hmm. And there was a pattern to it that I saw. And it was in the midst of that Jason shared something with me that I didn't know before. Mm-hmm. Well, you want to share that?
Yeah, that was, I had my own issue of a struggle with pornography for a long time. And again, that wasn't on the list. None of those things were. No. I didn't write that on the list because honestly, at that time, it wasn't a big struggle for me. It wasn't something that I was accessing all the time, but it was a wound that was
for sure
inside of me, and it was the drug of choice that I had whenever I would feel down. That's what I would access to make myself feel better. But I wrote down all the stuff that I thought, was my struggle, and then asked everybody else, and you could imagine it was all different than what I wrote down.
Right.
And that's the whole purpose of the 360 thing, is so you can see yourself from a different angle. You can see a 360 degree view of yourself And so I was able, for the first time in my life, I was able to see myself in a different perspective. And that was and of course the pornography stuff came up in the midst of it.
Right.
Because
it was almost like an aside.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, there's a pattern here and pattern here.
Yeah.
And Jason's like, oh, I didn't tell you, but I struggle with sex addiction or pornography or something like that. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It was just kind of an aside. And so continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
For me, being in the church world, that was my biggest struggle. It was my biggest thing.
Right.
Even though it was, I mean, if I went to a sex addiction group and I shared my story, they would probably go, "You're not addicted. You don't have a struggle." But it was my struggle. And it was relative to me, and the pain involving that was huge.
Right.
And of course, working in the church world, it was totally hidden. And it was something we never would ever talk about, but it was just that festering wound inside of me that I didn't really know. I tried to deal with over and over again, but could never really get out of.
Right.
So understanding what I was really rooted in, doing that 360-degree method was actually, we saw that the pornography issue is just one of the fruit on the tree.
Yeah.
What I saw was my major issue. Wasn't the issue at all.
The issue. And it's interesting because I brought Jason through a process that's based on the theory of constraints. And if you want to, you can go, all you analytical people can go and take a look at it. But it's really, hey, what's the root cause to the problem? And over time, through all the years that I've been coaching and doing this, there's probably more than 6, but I found 6 major constraints that people have that are the root causes of the behaviors they have. So if you want to write these down, they're important. Pride, rejection, anger, insecurity, shame, and fear. Those are all in this circle where the constraint would be. But the 2 that are really at the core of that are rejection and insecurity. And as I looked at the stuff that was exposed in the 360 and was having the conversation with Jason, Jason's like, well, I suffer from this addiction. And I looked at him, I said, well, that's not your problem. And I remember seeing his mouth go, and I go, your problem is rejection. You're suffering from rejection. And because of that, you're looking for affirmation and acceptance. And when you don't get in the world around you, you go online and get it while you're watching pornography. That's where you're getting your acceptance. And it was just like his world had turned in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And I said, so whenever someone is making you feel guilty or shame, or they're being tough on you, or you feel depressed, your reaction is, I want to get acceptance, and let's go and do pornography. Mm-hmm. Now, it would be the same if someone did it with alcohol, or did it with some other type of drug, or even something weird like if you're a clean freak, right? So I'm not getting accepted anywhere else, but I can get accepted. I can give myself acceptance, if I clean the house well and everything's neat and beautiful. So when someone walks into my house, they're like, wow, your house is clean. Yeah. And that's where they're getting their acceptance. So,
by the way, the whole pornography acceptance thing is a tough issue for people to process because they don't understand how viewing pornography will gain acceptance. But we'll actually address that in a future podcast specifically because there's all kinds of science behind that now, brain science and everything to help you understand why people are not just driven to that, but other addictions as well.
Right. And if people could just get to the core reason why they do it, they could get through it. Mm-hmm. I've seen it time and time again. And the people that go through different addiction recovery programs, if they don't get to the root cause and they just basically say, and I'm not saying this is what they do, and I haven't been through an addiction recovery program, so I'm not too super familiar with it, but yet I've been able to help several people with addictions, even though I don't have experience going through one of those programs. But it seems to me like they're just not getting to the root cause. And since they're not getting to the root cause, it's a Band-Aid somewhere even if the Band-Aid's a little bit deeper, it isn't all the way to the root, and Band-Aids can be torn off. They really can. So people don't quite get to the place unless they find out what the root cause to that is. So what's interesting, and I guess I'm not trying to race through this, but
No.
it's, so after going through that, on the fly, we came up with, okay, this makes logical sense in terms of what the next step should be, and what the next step should be, and what the next step should be. And if I'm not mistaken, it really was just a few months after that meeting that you really didn't struggle with it anymore.
Yeah,
right?
and it's the exact same way when I meet with people now.
Yeah.
Take them through the same process, which is like, it's not an exact science, but there's some guidelines, some guardrails that you take people down the same pathway. And what happens is they figure out what they're rooted in. They realize how to manage it, and then they're off and running.
Right.
Because honestly, I tried to get into this arena where, because pornography was part of my story, I wanted to help people overcome that issue.
Right.
Well, I would have meetings with people, and they would realize very quickly what their problem was, and they'd be gone. So try to make a living doing that. 1 or 2 meetings, 3 meetings here, and then you're off and running.
Yeah.
So that just shows us that the solution is clear.
Right.
Finding what the root of the issue is, and really beginning that pathway to freedom.
Right.
Because it is a journey. I tell people all the time, my journey went like this. It had ups and downs. There were slip ups. There were times where I wasn't perfect, where I wasn't making the right choices. As a man though, I want to go out of the gate and go. My idea is to go straight up, but it really does go up and down, but it trends upward.
Right.
So over time, you find yourself in a different place than you were when you started.
Yeah.
So if you are on your own freedom journey, if you're having this, you're meeting with, or you're hearing this for the first time, just know that you're not perfect, and in the process, there are slip ups. There are, it's not a perfect thing, because you're not perfect, and so there's grace in the journey, and that's again. The relationship that I had with Gary, or still have with Gary, for me was the first time I had another man in my life who wasn't rejecting me. It was not a conditional relationship, because I remember that very clearly. I remember sitting in that office with all the windows on it. People could watch us and they're walking by. And I remember him telling me, I'm not leaving this relationship. I'm not leaving you. You probably don't even remember saying that, but I remember you saying that.
I actually said that?
Yeah.
Dang, I don't have an out now.
It was, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you share with me. I'm not walking away from this friendship.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was being in the church world, everything's conditional.
Right.
Where it's supposed to be grace-based, man, if you screw up, you're out.
And this is coming from a pastor, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So having that type of relationship was really the first time in my life.
Well, it's another part of the coaching process is really you set up a no judgment zone. If someone's afraid to say something, you're never really going to get them fixed. Mm-hmm. If I give someone an activity to do, and I'm trying to hold them accountable, and they're afraid that I'm going to judge them along the way, so they'll tell me they did it, so I assume they did it, and then before you know it, I'm 10 steps ahead of where they're at, and we've got to go back. I'd much rather have them say, no, Gary, I got overwhelmed, I didn't do it. Great. So let's talk about overwhelm, right? And we go and try to fix that. Because if that's what actually got in the way, then we need to work on that. Mm-hmm. So it's really important in any relationship that's important to have that no judgment zone, to be able to freely talk about stuff and not worry that it's going to really impact the relationship in a negative way. And it ends up creating a loving relationship, right? Yeah. I mean, I truly believe that if I needed Jason to help me with something, he'd do it, and he knows that I would do it for him too. So that's an important part of it. So I appreciate you guys coming in and joining us today. Please continue to look at our podcast. We'll continue this conversation and many others as we move on. We're at www.myfreedomjourney.com. I'm Gary Marco, and this is
Jason Mahr.
And you have yourself a wonderful day.